Let's get to Mikhail Sergachev in Tampa. You did mention him earlier. Brutal injury for him. Had surgery on Thursday to stabilize his fibula and tibia. And that Instagram post, we'll get to Tampa and what might be next for them. But just seeing that Instagram post and seeing it be emotional, that was really tough to read, honestly.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was tough to read. You're right, and he was playing his first game in 7 weeks that night. He hadn't played since December 19th. Gets 10 minutes or so of ice time into that game. 10 minutes into his return, and falls awkwardly after taking a reverse hit from Alexis Lafreniere, and I don't know the exact timeline here that the Lightning didn't disclose one, but clearly when he's having surgery the next day and they're immediately putting him in rehab, I think that there's a chance to save his season, maybe if they're into the playoffs or what have you. But that's a lot to digest if you're in Sergachev's shoes, given that he's just worked his way all the way back to playing again. I don't know if you saw his previous post before that one, Julian, but he's like, "We're back." It's like a picture of him, and naturally he's excited after a long injury layoff, as any player would be. So it's been crushing. It's just been a tough year for Sergachev. Really from top to bottom. If you look at his numbers, it's not necessarily what you'd expect. Even when he was healthy, there was a time there he was taken off the top power play unit, and Victor Hedman had regained that spot. His plus minus, which I know is not always the best stat to gauge a player's season, but he's at minus 16 for 30 odd games. I think it tells the story where I just think this year has been a struggle for him. And, obviously he wants to be a number one type of guy. He's at that age. He's kind of been groomed the right way. He's got the big contract, and, he's plays the second most minutes on the Lightning in terms of a per game basis. And now he's facing an uphill climb back. And so, it's been a patch it together kind of year on the Lightning blue line. Darren Radish, who actually really opened my eyes last year covering that Lightning Leaf series, was a player, quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about. And he was playing monster minutes in that series and played very well, I thought, for Tampa. He's essentially been up on the right side there with Hedman on the top pairing when Sergachev's been out. They've rotated a whole bunch of players that you'd need a hockey DB account open to know who they are playing on their bottom pairing. And I say that with respect to them, of course, but it's been by committee. So shifting to what Tampa's going to do, it was my understanding they were already calling around on defensemen before the Sergachev injury just to gauge the market, see what upgrades might be out there for them. The real key item here will be by March 8th. I think Julian Brisebois is going to know, is there a world Sergachev's back during the regular season? Because if he's not, he's basically got $8.5 million now of LTIR space to play with when it comes to making additions. The Lightning have traded away a lot of picks in recent years. All the way back to Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, Nick Paul, Brandon Hagel, last year's Tanner Jeannot. Through the course of those transactions at the deadlines in the last 4 years, they've traded away a boatload of picks, so that they're not left with as many as you would have to necessarily say that they're going to go out there big game hunting. But I think Julian Brisebois, honestly, for my money, is the best GM in the league. You probably have a debate about maybe Kelly McCrimmon in Vegas. Vegas made a ton of smart moves on the way to winning their cup and having the success they've had too. But I would just say never sleep on Julian Brisebois, especially now that it looks like the scenario is there where he potentially has all that cap space. I mean, that was his biggest challenge. He found a way to fit all those other guys in that I mentioned in environments where he didn't really have a ton of cap space to play with. There's a world here if Sergachev's out for 10 more weeks, essentially through the end of the regular season, that Tampa could be in on basically anybody.
In terms of anybody, is it somebody that has to sort of fit that style of play that Sergachev has? Is it a stopgap? Who could they be looking for if it gets to that point where they feel they need somebody?
Well, look at history, right? I mean, Goodrow and Coleman both ended up having one more year on the deals at the time the deals were made, and that ended up being a home run trade because they formed 2/3 of a pretty dynamic third line, and they won cups in both of those seasons. Hagel and Paul were both traded for, in Hagel's case, was a restricted free agent, so the Tampa knew they had his rights, and signed to long-term contracts. Tanner Jeannot, similar, they're acquiring a player there that isn't what we would call a rental. So I think based on past behavior, I'm going to look for Tampa to make not an obvious move, because that's kind of the way Julian has always operated, in the Lightning front office. And so it's hard to connect them to anyone credibly or or for me to say today it's this guy they're going to go trade for. But I would be looking for the non-obvious moves for something that maybe solves a future problem and a current problem. And the biggest thing in Tampa they have to be mindful of, it's two things. This is the last year you got Steven Stamkos under contract, right? I mean, we've talked about that story a lot, but you don't know for sure what the future holds there. Like, I think this is a year, even though they're in a wild card spot as we're recording this, you want to kind of go in, I think, one more time. I would guess if you're in the front office, you just don't know. Every year it's going to get harder and harder, I think, for them to keep it together. The core players are getting a little older. You might lose more. Like, look at what they've already lost, right? I mean, I saw Tyler Johnson actually posted a photo on his Instagram page over the All-Star break. Like, he's on a vacation with Stamkos and Hedman, but also Ryan McDonough, Pat Maroon, Andre Palat, like all those former Lightning guys. Obviously, they all won together once upon a time. Those players are all playing elsewhere, and there's the possibility you're going to have that with Stamkos. And so, I think that there's going to be the inclination to want to go in on it this year and really give the team the best chance to have another championship run. But also, he's got to make a trade that suits that sets them up well cap wise down the road. And so, look for some undervalued players. I think that's kind of been what he's done. Like Hagel, with respect to Brandon Hagel, wasn't a huge name, but he gave up 2 first rounders for him in that trade with Chicago, and it's because he prized how cost effective he was, that he filled a specific need for this team. And so, that's where I'm looking. I would expect them to tinker around the edges. And the Lightning, no matter what Julian ever says in front of the microphone, like this year, we're not going to be big deadline players. They're always big deadline players. Shrewd operator, smart, really smart guy. And now, again, I'm sorry that Mikhail Sergachev had to get injured for it to happen, but all of a sudden now they might have a ton of money to play with. I think it kind of opens up a whole new set of options that until that game at Madison Square Garden this week that he wouldn't have had.
Was Nikita Kucherov part of that list of current and former Tampa players vacationing? Just wondering if there was like a triplets line reunion.
No, I didn't. Well, I can't say he wasn't there, but he wasn't in the photo. So maybe that would be a good one. I missed the triplets line.
Yeah, it's funny to think like Nikita Kucherov at one point was just like a third of like a really cool line for Tampa, and now he's like a top 10 player in the league. Like, you could argue he should be top 5. He could win the Hart Trophy this year
for a second time.
Like, and John Cooper has said that like he's playing, at least when I had asked him the question, like he's playing at a level like higher than when he won it like how many years ago. What a guy.
Right. Well, and get this, I covered a playoff series. It was the Canadiens Lightning series in 2014 where he was a healthy scratch, Kucherov. So, I mean, not many players go from ever being a healthy scratch to winning a Hart Trophy. Like, he's already traveled kind of the road less traveled, I would call it. And he's got you're right, got another shot at the Hart this year. I probably have McKinnon there right now.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, we haven't done this game, and I haven't looked at it closely. Like, I'm not committing to it, but my gut right now tells me it's McKinnon's to lose at this stage of the season.
Save your award ballot for when it comes time. We'll trade notes.
When we're in garbage time in March, you mean? Like when we're trying to figure out I'm just kidding. That's harsh. But that's what they call in basketball, right? The non-meaningful period.
You joke about that, but there's truth in every joke.